All right, so the reviews are in for Resident Evil Requiem on the Nintendo Switch 2, PlayStation, Xbox, and PC. This is the next big AAA title to play across multiple platforms, but the surprising thing for many people, and the first time in a while that I can remember at least, is that we've got a big AAA Resident Evil game launching day and date on all major platforms. So that's super exciting, especially for Nintendo Switch 2 fans who want to get in on the action when it comes to Resident Evil day and date at launch. So right now, the main platform is the PlayStation 5. There are about 80 reviews or so and rising, and it's got a really good score. So that's the good news here when it comes to Resident Evil Requiem across all platforms. There's a lot of positives and very few negatives. Capcom has crafted another incredible experience. But before we continue on, we are giving away a Nintendo Switch 2. All you have to do to enter is hit that subscribe button if you aren't already subscribed, and drop a comment below. We are giving away a Nintendo Switch 2 once we hit 150,000 subscribers, and it will be random. So the more that you actually comment and interact, the better chance that you have to win. Hit that like button, click that notification bell, and let's go ahead and jump right back into it. We're going to start off with Shack News, hear what they had to say, and they gave it a 10 out of 10 and said Resident Evil Requiem is a crown jewel in Capcom survival horror crown. Its characters develop realistically, its rhythm between action and horror show more than satisfy fans of both styles, and its story gripped me from beginning to end. This is the Resident Evil at its finest, and I can't wait to see where Capcom takes the series next. Next one up is a 9.2 out of 10 from Nintendo, and they said this: Capcom has recaptured the essence of classic horror without giving up on action, and it's brought it to Nintendo Switch 2 with an ambition you can really feel. It may not be the prettiest version, but it's the most versatile and comfortable, and proves the console is ready for the generation's biggest releases. Next up is from Nintendo Life, 9 out of 10, and they said Resident Evil Requiem sets a new benchmark for a series that has been pretty consistently great for the last decade or so by combining classic survival horror with the more action-focused gameplay of RE4. The result is an experience paced to perfection. Add in a lore-heavy narrative and copious Easter eggs, and you've got what might be the ultimate expression of Resident Evil. There are a few minor visual hiccups along with some inconsistency in frame rate during busier moments, but the fact that we've got a brand new flagship RE game running well on Switch 2 should be celebrated. The lack of Mercenaries mode feels like a missed opportunity, but I've got my fingers crossed that it eventually shows up. And yeah, that's unfortunate there isn't any Mercenaries mode at launch. That's always been one of the cool things to kind of get into for a Resident Evil game after you're done with the campaign. All right, next up is from games.cz. They gave it a 9 out of 10 and said Resident Evil Requiem is a magnificent return of the horror legend, balancing pure survival and action, and not all of its ideas work equally well, but as a whole it represents a superbly crafted, audio-visually stunning, and extremely entertaining blockbuster that confirms that Capcom has its flagship series firmly in hand. Despite minor reservations, it is a fantastic horror ride that only narrowly misses the absolute peak of the series. Next up, 9 out of 10 from Pocket Tactics. This will be the last 9 that we'll go over, and then we'll check out some of the 8 scores. Resident Evil Requiem wonderfully blends survival horror and action, featuring 2 compelling protagonists with starkly different experiences that keep the gameplay fresh. The story is excellent, fitting nicely into the Resident Evil universe at large, and the game runs really well on the Nintendo Switch 2. Alright, let's get into the 8 scores. Jux Video, 8.5 out of 10, saying, with Requiem, the grand finale is complete. Capcom unites all fans of its saga in a bloody communion. Whether they prefer first-person horror or over-the-shoulder action, I just want to add in here, I love the fact that Capcom did add in third and first person, but for me, I'm going to be playing it in third person. Capitalizing on fan service, this Resident Evil resurrects the dead as much as memories, but could have been otherwise with Leon confronted by his eternal demons. Immediately, Requiem rehashes old ideas, but it brilliantly succeeds in its gamble of delivering 2 games in one. Even if the story is once again flimsy, all sorts of extravagances, Beautiful, generous, well-paced, comprehensive, and designed to satisfy longtime fans. Resident Evil Requiem is devoured like a rich, over-the-top compilation with extra catch-up. Okay. Next up is from Tech Radar Gaming. They gave it an 8 out of 10. This is the lowest score recorded so far. I will double check though to see if new scores have came in, and we will go over that. So 8 out of 10. Resident Evil Requiem shines in its incredible first half, which masterfully blends pulse-pounding horror with intense action. Unfortunately, that winning formula isn't maintained throughout the latter sections, which devolve into fan service moments strung together by an increasingly sloppy plot. Still enjoyable, but ironic that an installment about moving on from the past would be so weighed down by it. So interesting there. Nintendo Insider has a TBD on theirs, and they said this: we need a little more time with Resident Evil Requiem on Nintendo Switch 2 before delivering a final verdict. For now, it's encouraging to see Capcom nail a solid handheld experience, and the multi-protagonist structure and the tale that they have woven have already made its entry far more engrossing than its recent predecessors. The kind that lingers in your mind long after you put the controller down. Okay, good stuff there. All of the reviews so far are really good. Some people like some of the nostalgic fan service plot type of stuff. Others don't, so it's really going to be depending on how much you like that or not. Now, recently, I talked about Resident Evil Requiem because there was a creator's voice video that Nintendo uploaded on their YouTube channel recently, and it was awesome because the director of the game, Resident Evil Requiem, he talked about a number of things when it comes to horror, when it comes to action, when it comes to Resident Evil, and the Nintendo Switch 2 itself. And one of the really cool things about it is that he said that when they first decided to see if this game could run on the Nintendo Switch 2, they had to do like a double and triple take because it was running so well and it played so well, and the specs of the system for portable mode looked good. The game looked solid on there, and now we're seeing with these reviews what they were talking about was correct with it, because the game is performing and easily one of the best looking and running AAA titles on the Nintendo Switch 2. So it's absolutely a good thing that this game is on here so Nintendo fans can experience. And I think that what this really does is, especially in Japan, this creates a massive bump when it comes to sales, and I would just say availability for what people are picking up right now, because the PlayStation 5, it's dominant in a lot of areas like Europe and in the US, but in Japan, the Nintendo Switch 2 is pretty much the dominant, most bought platform right now. That's where people are buying a lot of the games, and Nintendo Switch 1 is behind that at this point. So I do think that Capcom definitely did a great job with this and probably increased their sales by millions when it's all said and done across the board, when you're looking at Europe, US, and of course Japan and other regions. And on top of the Nintendo Switch 2 growing in install base every single week, every single month, getting more and more people to pick up the system, which I do think by the end of the year, it's going to be even bigger, because we should get the new Generation 10 Pokemon game and probably a custom Nintendo Switch 2 with that design, like with Pokemon or something like that. So I do feel that that's going to happen, and of course that's going to bump up sales significantly more, which does help out games like Resident Evil. Now, another thing that people don't know about Resident Evil is that on the Nintendo Switch 1, despite not having the newer games with Resident Evil 7 and Resident Evil 8 and Resident Evil 2 Remake and Resident Evil 3 Remake and Resident Evil 4, not having those native, at least. There were some cloud versions of some of them, but we're talking about real native stuff. Nobody really buys those cloud versions. So despite not having those, Resident Evil still sold incredibly well on the Nintendo Switch 1. Resident Evil 4, 5, and 6 in particular, I think according to Capcom, those sold over 3 million units all combined, so about 1 million a pop per them. And I know for a fact that Resident Evil 6 a while ago did 1 million plus on the Nintendo Switch 1. Now, they were dirt cheap, or they were in collections and packages and sales and deals, but that's something that Resident Evil and Capcom is pretty much known for when it comes to their games anyway, across all the different platforms. But what it really shows here is that there is a strong demand for Resident Evil on Nintendo platforms. And I think that's also one of the reasons why Capcom was so, I would say, forthcoming with saying, hey, let's try this out. Let's see if we can get this on here, because they know that people have been purchasing Resident Evil on the Nintendo Switch 1 platform, and even backwards compatible playing it on the Nintendo Switch 2. So it's all positive news when it comes to Resident Evil Requiem on the Nintendo Switch 2. I like the fact that Capcom decided to put this game out on the platform, and it's really cool to see a big game like this launching day and date. And what I would say is that we need more developers. Get it done. I know the Nintendo Switch 2 is new. Not everybody had dev kits at the same time, and development and porting, it takes time. So I'm not going to sit there and say that it's something to where every single developer should have day and day. I know that it's tough to do that, but going forward, I think that we'll see, especially once we get some of these sales numbers here, that having it day and date on the Nintendo Switch 2, on Xbox, on PlayStation, and on PC, you can get everything all at the same time. That makes it so much better when it comes to the potential of your game and selling everything. So good to see there. I will be picking up Resident Evil Requiem myself. I am picking up the Generations pack. That's going to be Resident Evil 7, Resident Evil 8, and Resident Evil Requiem all in one bundle. It is game key cards, but it's too good of a deal to pass up. You get the standard price of Resident Evil Requiem for the 70, but then you also get Resident Evil 7 and Resident Evil 8 with all the DLC, all of the updates, and everything all packed in for $10 a pop on the Nintendo Switch 2. So it just made too much sense for me not to pick that one up, even though I don't really like Resident Evil 7. I had the game originally on the Xbox One X, I think, and PlayStation 4 or something like that, but I've played it and I don't really like it too much. Resident Evil 8 is a game that I need to play a bit more, so I'll see about that one. There is a third person mode, so I'm thinking maybe I'll like that one a bit more, because I'm just not a huge fan of first person Resident Evil. This is something that I never really liked. I like third person Resident Evil. My favorite is Resident Evil 4. For those who have been on this channel, if you watch my other Resident Evil videos, I always like to make sure that I mention that. Resident Evil 4, the original on the GameCube, and then Resident Evil 4 Remake. Those are like my two favorites. And there's been a lot of talk about when Capcom could actually make Resident Evil 2, 3, and 4, those remakes, on the Nintendo Switch 2. Now, I do think that the Generations pack so far, it's selling pretty well on the Nintendo Switch 2 eShop. I think it's in the top 5 when it comes to the Generations pack, and the regular version's also in the top 20, so I do see Capcom porting over Resident Evil 2, 3, and 4 Remake, and I think that it's probably going to be announced this year. I'm guessing that they're going to announce it at the end of the year for an early next year release, because we do have, potentially, based off of Dust Golem, who is a notable leaker, he's gotten a lot of stuff right, Resident Evil 0 Remake and Resident Evil Code Veronica Remake coming in the next 2 years. So I'm guessing that Capcom wants to have those out before, when it comes to Resident Evil 2, 3, and 4 Remake, on the Nintendo Switch 2 before those other two remakes come out, because I think those other two remakes are also going to be on the Nintendo Switch 2. So I think that would be pretty cool if they can get that done, to get Resident Evil 2 through 4 remakes on the Nintendo Switch 2, and even better if they can get them this year at the end of the year or so we get a lot of Resident Evil, get all caught up on the games that we didn't get native on the Nintendo Switch 1, and then lead into the next remakes that are coming in the next couple of years here. I think that's going to be pretty good. And I think that when it comes to these reviews, what we've seen so far from what some of the people that have got a chance to play the game have said about Resident Evil Requiem is that it's a really good Nintendo Switch 2 port. So Capcom is putting their best foot forward, trying to put out games on the Nintendo Switch 2 to some pretty good results so far this year alone. Actually, this first few months alone, they've got all sorts of good stuff, from Resident Evil Requiem to Monster Hunter Stories 3 that's coming out next month, and then the following month in April they've got Pragmata as well. So Capcom got a lot of good stuff for the Nintendo Switch 2, and that is a huge change from how it was with the Switch 1, where people were so angry. I remember people getting crazy on Capcom back then because Capcom kept on saying we're testing the waters with Monster Hunter like Generations or something like a port, and we're doing some of this and that, and they didn't bring over a lot of their big games. They weren't porting over everything. They were kind of waiting and seeing how things worked out, and ultimately, yes, Capcom did support with more games, Dragon's Dogma and obviously Monster Hunter Rise, but people were really upset that they weren't supporting with more in 2017 and 2018, just little ports and little things here and there. But now at this point, they didn't make the same mistake, which is good because we've got their biggest games coming out on the Nintendo Switch 2 right there, day and date, with stuff like Monster Hunter Stories 3, Pragmata, Resident Evil Requiem, and we're getting great ports as well with 7 and 8. So very good when it comes to Capcom and how they started off this generation, and I'm interested to see what they do next on the system. So I will be playing Resident Evil Requiem. I don't know if I'm going to stream it or not. I'll probably get a video on it. I'm going to pick it up, or I might get a review code. I'm not really sure at this point. I'll probably do both, or I'll probably get both, one on PS5. I'll get my Generations pack, and I'll definitely play it and give you guys my thoughts in live streams, and of course in a video as well, once I'm done and kind of get around to it. So what do you guys think when it comes to Resident Evil Requiem and the review so far, and Capcom as a whole and what they're doing on the platform? Let me know in the comment section below. All right, guys, that wraps it up for this video here. Thank you so much for watching. I do appreciate it. Please make sure you hit that like button, subscribe if you're someone new, click that notification bell, and check out my other Nintendo Switch 2 RPG content and more right here on screen. Thanks for watching, and we'll catch you guys for the next one. Peace.